Okay, so March 20th of 2024, before I start my day, this is Canadian Prepper. He likes to talk about what's going on in the world when it comes to possible war and why. But in the meantime, he put in a small little clip of a robot and how sophisticated they're becoming as they basically teach themselves to get better at whatever it is that they're doing. And I think he said initially they run the program with the robot through a simulation, right? Like through a computer program that's simulated, and then they give it a chance. That's it right there. They give it a chance to practice its skills, and as it practices its skills, it just gets better at what it does because it can teach itself. Yeah. All right, so this is not the kind of robot that I exposed with the corner of British Columbia, Canada, with that processing board, motherboard, in its hair. However, as I looked at this after the fact of me doing my video, because I'm still questioning, why did that thing come to the door and placed itself right in front of us before the door was slammed in our face? Okay? But before we talk about that, let's just look at what the media, our governments, like to show the public in terms of where the technology is in development when it comes to robots compared to the robots that we aren't being told about. Now, I don't see very well, people. We know that. So I'm not catching everything in this video. But I did notice you've got somebody here. There's a man holding something in his hand, to which makes me think it's the handler. He is the handler. Who knows? It could be a robot handling a robot. You don't know in this day and age anymore what's going on. But anyway, we'll just assume that this is a man, and he's got a little device that is controlling this, for the most part. But if you look here, do you see this? That's a backpack. Something is here. I see an ear. I see the back of a head. I see a backpack. Probably another one right here. Here's another one. Here's some legs. You can see with another backpack, because what they're doing, and I've seen a video of this, is they're creating these androids, dressing them up with their costumes, whatever costume they want to dress them up in. And they seem to have little battery packs or some kind of something attached to them. I seen a video on that. So obviously this is a building of some sorts where they're working on robots, whether in this form or whether in human form. And they come in all shapes and sizes, are designed for different abilities. Now this thing has 4 legs, right? And it's gonna climb up this big box, almost like a spider. It goes very fast. I may have to slow down the video, but let's look.
Speaking of robotics, now look, I've seen videos going back to Petman.
Let me turn it up and we'll listen to what he has to say.
Original Big Dog, back in 2008, I have seen every robot Boston Dynamics adjacent video out there. This one blows my mind. Okay, and I've seen, you know, Cheetah, I've seen the Petman running and all that stuff, the new ones, but this one, this blows my mind. Take a look at this, okay? We're almost here. Now, when they integrate this with NVIDIA's big $30,000, $40,000 chip that they're selling that's like 30 times more powerful than anything else out there, when they integrate that with this, and I'm going to show you a link next that's going to show you how they're going to train these robotics, it's going to blow your mind. The things we are going to see in the next 5 years are going to be out of a science fiction.
Well, I think we've already seen what's out there in terms of motherboards and hair posing as corners. Literally.
Movie. Take a look at this.
Okay, here it comes. You watching? Look how that went down there.
I gotta replay that because some of you are gonna be like, some idiot in the comment section was like, oh yeah, they had that technology in 1990. You could get it at Canadian Tire for 20 bucks. Are you on drugs? Do you know how much computing goes into making something like this and just the mechanics of it? Let's watch that again. Shift to solar.
Why are we not surprised? It's working its way up now. Let me just go back as, okay.
That is freaking unbelievable. And this is what they're showing us.
Yeah, that's what they're showing us.
That's what they're showing us. And you know how it's learning how to do this? It's not learning how to do this through trial and error. It is learning how to do that in virtual reality. It is running simulations like a virtual dojo millions and millions of times. It's teaching itself how to walk. You can show it something once and it trains itself millions of times in virtual sight.
Yeah. Why did that place itself right in front of the door next to John Hart, the one that lured Sierra to her death, with that 6'3" cop, 6'3" cop standing next, 1, 2, 3, with the door being slammed in my face, my daughter's face, my son's face, as they refused to allow us to identify Sierra's supposedly dead body. Why did that thing put itself right in front of the door? What was it trying to teach itself, being that it wasn't real? Okay? It had no need to follow us to the door. Outside of something was bringing them, those individuals, because we don't know who's human, who's not. Something brought them together, where they all felt that they had to stand in front of the door, look at us as a team before they slammed the door in our face. And then they called in the 6'7" baby-faced looking cop as backup to guard the door. Does that sound very professional? What were they trying to teach that was masquerading as a corner? My camera just happened to catch it, people.
It wasn't for the Hannibal Doctrine.
Don't you find that too funny? X
to Gaza and the people of Gaza. That is what Hamas does.
Club.
This number of 1,200
Don't you
people
find that
was
too
killed,
funny?
This is something they needed to do what they're doing right now.
Sure, and now Israel doesn't care about their own
G-kids
hostages.
speak.
They literally don't even talk about that.
I'm just
They
saying.
don't give a shit about their hostages.
Right.
If they gave a shit about their hostages, they wouldn't have killed 3 people
X
coming towards them with
speaks.
a white flag, 2
Part
talking to them
5.
in Hebrew.
X
If they gave a shit
speaks.
about that,
Part
that's when they would have
3.
stopped.
Where's
And I
part
don't
4?
care about the fog of war and this, that,
What
and the
happened
other.
to part
Anyone
1?
walking with a white flag and shouting at you in Hebrew.
X
you're killing them.
speaks. Part 2.
We know what you're trying to
Doesn't
do.
look like
You're
they're
basically-
showing
what
all
they're
my
trying to do is
playlists.
that if every
Merrick
151 of these
speaks.
hostages was murdered,
What's going on?
That would make the righteousness of the
Why
cause
am
of
I
Benjamin
missing a whole
Netanyahu
bunch of freaking,
100 times better than it
That's a
is
good
right
point.
now.
They're trying to get the hostages killed.
Oh, here we go.
100%. Because if they
I don't
wanted to get their
know.
hostages out, you know what you do?
One
you
of
call
10.
for a ceasefire, and you turn around and say, we're going to have a
You get
ceasefire,
the
give our
point.
people back. And once they
I
get
have
their people
42
back,
playlists.
guess what? We'll go back to murdering you.
That didn't look
killing
like
you.
42 to
No,
me.
They're using the death of these people to turn.
Oh, you have to bring it up to the
currency
top.
that will allow them to get away with
Right.
as much murder as they can.
What
And
we're gonna
Benjamin
do
Netanyahu is
here-
sitting in his seat for one reason and one reason only. Because he has kept
My
this battle
channel
going.
wiped
He's
out.
kept this war
X
going.
speaks.
Day one of this, the ceasefire
I'm
is
the
finished,
original.
he is out
Oh,
on
you're
his
right.
arse,
There was an
mate.
Israeli civil war.
Just
That's the
remember
main motive
that.
right there.
There's X Club.
He
Yeah,
has to go, and he
right.
knows his days are numbered. There is
I
nothing
guess
left for
because
him to do
Elon
other
Musk
than
has
try and
money,
prolong this as much as he can, and he's
somehow
trying his
that
best
makes
to
it
get Lebanon into the
okay.
battle.
Here we go.
He's trying his
Malcolm
best
X
by bombing
chocolate milk
Damascus to get
party.
Damascus involved. He's trying to
Don't
get
forget
America to
about
attack,
that. The chocolate
Iran
milk
for him.
party.
He's trying to expand the
Right.
sphere of this conflict.
So
And
if
You
you're
kids
right,
speak.
we're about to see a major false flag in America to get us involved.
A million percent. I mean, I don't put anything. I don't put anything beyond the stretch of
I'm
what
looking
Israel
for-
is willing to do
okay,
to bring
so we
America
got
into
X
conflict on its
Peak,
behalf
part
and have
4.
American servicemen die on her behalf. That is just their nature.
Let's
That's what they.
see.
At the end
I'm
of the
just
day,
wondering.
Iraq being destroyed.
X Peak,
was
part
doing
3.
Israel
X
a massive
Peak, part
favour.
5.
All of this Iraq war and that and the other, all good and well for the oil fields to be all good.
Where's number 2?
All right,
Number 2.
Thank you.
Did you see number
Mr.
1?
Points,
Hold
we're
on a
gonna come right
minute.
back in a few minutes
Okay, just listen for a second.
on Shopping Mall. Chase Geiser, my God, you're a father too. What do you make of this? Can you feel the danger?
Yeah, I can absolutely feel the danger. And
Apparently this just happened in Russia.
the crazy thing about this is it's never obvious initially, except for maybe to you, Alex. You were really good about this with 9/11. Who's actually behind it? So 9/11 happened. 90% of Americans believed that it was a terror attack because they hated our freedom. And they didn't have any inkling to think that maybe it was planned or a false flag, or we knew it was going to happen and allowed it to happen. So I'm wondering, what are the odds, Alex, that it's right after this election for Putin? What are the odds that Russia wants this to happen so they can use it as an excuse to escalate?
He's won by 87%. He's trying to de-escalate. The Ukrainians said we're going to stage terror attacks. They're on record.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I blame Russians in 10 seconds. But
That's my
'cause I
light.
hope they did it because they use it for some domestic. No, this is full war. I just pray right now Putin has restraint, Chase.
Well, that's one thing about Putin. You can say what you will about whether he's a sociopath or not, or evil or a despot. He is someone who's been in power for an extended period of time
There's
on
actually
multiple
something I
occasions in
wanna
multiple
do
different
here.
ways in Russia.
It's hard to punch his
Not on
button.
this
And he hasn't
video,
used the
but
nukes. I think
something else.
the major reason that NATO and the United States has been so antagonistic toward Russia is because they're worried about who's going to come into power next, and they want to get control over Russian sovereignty now so they can squeeze a madman that could potentially lead after Putin retires.
I totally agree. And by the way, I want to kick Jay Dyer off next hour. If he wants to co-host with us, he's welcome. Folks, we were...
Folks. Speaks. Merrick's. I'm surprised they're not saying
We're all in
Merrick's.
Israeli genocide and covering it. We're not censoring that. You can say that if you want, but what do people make about this? Let's go to the next speaker.
Let's go to the next speaker. X speaks. Okay, so this is like March 22nd of 2024. I came across a video. I haven't watched it all, but I don't know, people. It's some minister up in Alberta. They're coming in with some program to get homeless people off the streets. They're using the quote-unquote the excuse of it's not good for the homeless people to be sleeping in tents scattered throughout the city of Edmonton, Alberta. Not to mention what's going on in Calgary and Lethbridge and whatever, right? Or where Fort McMurray or wherever. But specifically Edmonton at this point, where, you know, it can get as low as 55 below. It doesn't really get that low. 40 below, maybe 42, unless something's changed over the last few years. Because I lived out in Alberta, people, and I don't ever remember it going down to 55 below. That's a little extreme. 40 below? Yeah. 0? Yeah, maybe, for sure. That can happen, but not 55. Either or. You know, this politician, he going on about, oh, they're putting themselves at risk to freezing, and, you know, if they're in a tent and they're using propane, you know, there's lots of fires, tent fires, and, you know, and then if ambulance and the fire department have to come, and blah, and we've got this new program where, you know, we just come in and one swoop, basically. They don't even warn the people anymore. He mentioned that, you know, in the past they'd give the people that were living in tent cities, you know, 2 or 3 day notice that the cops, or a week or whatever, that the cops are going to come in with the city and clear it out, you know, dismantle it, right? Well, now they don't even do that. I guess they're doing San Francisco style, where they just come in out of the blue randomly, more than likely in the middle of the freaking night when nobody's up and around to watch the shit, and just take everybody out of there. Take their shit. And he's talking about, oh yeah, we looked after people's stuff, you know, nobody's losing their stuff, and we take them to the center, some kind of center, transition center or something, like some place where they can get connected with services. And I'm pretty sure, people, he said that they can take up to 200 people on a white, quote unquote, white bus. All right, this dude, so he says, this minister, is a big guy. He's 6'8". I'm telling you, you gotta watch these tall ones. All right. So in the meantime, you know, this interview with, I don't know who this guy is. It just popped up on my feed, and he's interviewing this minister. So far, they both sound very intelligent, as if I know what intelligent is. But, you know, like, it's like, you know, forked tongue, right? You know, double speak. That's what I mean. Double speak. What they're saying isn't what they're saying. What they're saying is to smooth over what's happening in the underbelly of it. So if they gave people in the past 3 to 7 days warning that the city was coming in with the cops to clean up the area, quote unquote, and move everybody out of that particular tent city, and people had 3 to 7 days to pack up their stuff, do whatever, and move on, or wait for the time when they had no choice because they had no place to go or whatever. Now they can come. Apparently, don't ask me how they made it where they can do that. It must be a local, provincial legislation where they've made it where they can just go in at any hour of the day, on any day, randomly without telling anybody anything that they're coming and swoop them up all at one time. You either get on the bus and go get help with this program that we're setting up for you, right? Or I guess take your shit and leave. But they're on a mission to shut down every single homeless camp, whether you want to call it a tent city or not. Well, if they're starting in Edmonton, you know they're going to go, this is a minister, so he represents the province. He's working in the Parliament building, okay? You know they're going to go from city to city, town to town. So they're on a witch hunt for homeless people, basically. And to me, when they're saying, you know, we're going to take you on the white bus, we can, right? I don't know if they can put 200 on the bus, but either or, you're getting on a white bus. Interesting how he said white, right? In light of my last video that I just put up. Okay, coroner's car is white. Okay, they like white when they're not running around in black cars trying to be incognito. But besides that point, to go to a center to be processed where, they get referrals for this agency, referral for that, and they can go have a shower, they can have some coffee and some food, and they get to sit down with a social worker and, find out what their resources are. If they're not on welfare, which the majority of them, if not all, are on welfare, they can sign up for welfare. If you're living in a fucking tent, you've been in Alberta for quite a long time, they're on welfare. They're just not getting the housing part. That's what they did with Sierra. They made it so that she didn't get the housing part, and they just gave her the little bit of support. At one point, it was like $320 a month for support. That was all that she was getting, and the fucking streets. Okay, so I don't know. They're not really talking about quote-unquote housing them as they are about taking them to this. And if they do house them, you can guarantee they'll be in modules, those stack and pack container type looking boxes that have been cut into a little, where they have to go, and they're not allowed to have friends, they have to be in their little 6x4 module, or however much space 6 feet by 4 feet, they don't get much, right? They get just a little teeny weeny room. Just take a container and cut it into 6 portions, and there's their room. I don't know, but either or, I don't think they're very big, people, and they're not allowed to have friends. They have to be in it at a certain time, and if they die in those rooms, of course, it becomes a statistic for the coroner's office to say that it's single men in their houses killing themselves because they're depressed or it was an accident. When in fact, it's these individuals, that many of them coming in off the streets, they got being put into these modules, and because they're forced to be by themselves, and they haven't fully recovered with their addiction, or maybe they were hot capped, and because the cops like to cover up murder by fentanyl, they're running off with the bodies in the middle of the night, people. Even from the freaking modules, right? I've talked to people out here. Okay? It's a setup for fucking... So anyway, so... there's a couple of things I want you to hear just to reinforce what I said, and all it made me think about is basically San Francisco, where all of a sudden, out of the blue, nobody seen it coming. City came in with the cops in the middle of the night, in the middle of the city. We're talking San Francisco here, right? Swooped up on 1,000 homeless people, relocated them to God knows where. Some people to this day, through Rumorville, when you come and go into other videos and the subject comes up and they know more information than I do, are reporting that, a lot of these individuals that got swooped up have disappeared. Their family members are looking for them, their brothers, their mothers, their fathers, their sisters, their aunts, whoever, maybe kids. They can't find their loved one because they've disappeared. Rumor is some of these individuals have already been dismembered with their, extremities, where torsos are being stacked in warehouses, and who knows what's happening in terms of the food supply, food chain, right, people? Or organ harvesting, okay? I mean, sure, it's easy to put a rumor out there like that, but if some of these people have disappeared, and the rumor is, still to this day, many of them have not been found. People are looking for certain individuals, can't find them. No reports nothing to verify that 1,000 people were relocated in a safe, respectable manner where it's documented and it becomes public information, where it can be confirmed that whatever happened in the middle of the dark with nobody noticing was legitimate. Okay? Because as it is, if you're going to be creeping around in the middle of the night scaring the pants off of people, saying get on the fucking bus because they didn't walk off down the road with their shit, hell no. If you're sleeping in the tent, or you've been sleeping on the street corner in that tent for the last 4 years, and then all of a sudden, you don't even get a knock on the door, you just get somebody ripping up your fucking tent, unzipping it, saying, okay, that's it, you're evicted, get out. And then, if you're not taking down your tent, somebody else is taking down your tent. Who knows where that tent went? And they're not going to give it to you. They're not going to say, here, let's take down your tent. We'll fold it up, put it in a bag, and we'll hand it to you. And you can go walk off with the tent if you don't want to get on the bus. No, people. It ain't going to happen like that. Right? So anyway, so I'm listening to this shit. This is Alberta, right? So they're tippy-toeing around their new and approved program where they've made it somehow, some way, where it's legal for them to show up, knock on the tent. Oh, sorry, we'll just pull down the fucking zipper at 3 o'clock in the morning when you're sleeping in your tent city and say, that's it, you're being evicted. We're packing up your shit. You can pack it up or we're packing it up. You don't have a choice. You've got 1 hour to pack it up. But don't worry, we'll look after it. You can put it on that truck and you can go get on the bus. And then we're going to take you some processing center where we're going to hook you up with this program, wraparound, they like to call it wraparound services. A little bit of mental health. If you need like health care in terms of prescription or whatever, you get that. You get in touch with a social worker to see if you're on and off welfare. Figure out if maybe you're on the run in terms of like breach, and you actually, that will be their excuse to arrest you and put your ass in jail, even though you were homeless sleeping in a fucking tent. I'm just saying, people, like, okay, so anyway, let's say an Albertan homeless person in a tent doesn't want to go. Oh no, I'm not going. Let me pack up my tent and I'm going to go walk off to the next tent city. Only he can't say, or she can't say, tent city. I'll just leave. Well, where are you going? Well, I don't know. I'll go over. Well, you can't. Why? Well, because you're just going to set up another homeless camp over there. We're eradicating homeless we're eradicating homeless camps. You either come with us or what? Or what? And is there any guarantee that they're going to get to the next destination safely? Because, this shit's being done in the fucking dark here, people. Even if it was done in the middle of daylight, it's still shady. Okay? Because even if they take their tent and walk off and go 5 blocks, 10 blocks, 15, 50 blocks away, just as fast as they go, set up their tent there, you've got the city and the cops coming right behind them and doing it again. Sorry, we've banned homeless tent cities. You can't camp out anywhere in the province of Alberta. No. So, do that enough times, they're just going to arrest them, take their shit, throw it out in the garbage, and put their asses in jail. And then, after they milk the money of taxpayers to pay for that little stint in jail. They're going to release the petty criminal for being homeless back out onto the streets. And because, they're not trusting nobody. I wouldn't trust them. I wouldn't want to go off with them. No fucking way, people. No damn way. Knowing what I know, I'm telling you, that coroner was not a human. That coroner walked out of that bedroom. That robotoid coroner walked out of that bedroom with those 6'3" fucking female cops. She stood there with a skirt on. And then started beep, 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 beep. And then picked a fight. But if you notice, look how that thing put itself right in front of the door frame so it could look at us and compute whatever it was programmed to learn. Because they're trying to teach these things through experience. So what was it doing? Was it reading my face? Was it reading my children's faces? Was it targeting us in terms of, how do I say this? Taking data and then with that data saying hostile, like character traits, hostile, combative, hyper. Well, yeah, because they were antagonizing us from the fucking get-go, right? They were playing games from the get-go. Anyway, besides that point, that robotoid coroner was right there. And I know I have a picture with John Hart just a little bit off to the left of it. It was an it, people. And then that tall female cop a little more off. So 1, 2, 3. They are hive mind connected. I'm telling you. Hive mind connected. Okay? Right? That's why these things need handlers. Okay? They're not that, maybe some of them are very sophisticated. But anytime you think you come across these things, you'll notice they have handlers. Okay? Right? Anyway, that thing was right in front of the fucking doorway, looking right at me into the camera and looking at my kids. And it was a robotoid. So what kind of data, what kind fucking information was it collecting from us? And what was stored in terms of the enemy? Because they sure in hell didn't treat us like a friend. Okay. So this is what these people are up against, because that is the corner of the province that puts their John Henry as an official, legitimate, ethical, honest reporting agency when it comes to the cause of death. How the hell can a freaking robot do that? It can't. But it's happening in the province of British Columbia, Canada. And if it's happening here, you know it's happening in other provinces, and it's also happening in the United States of America. So whatever these individuals are doing in San Francisco, and now we've got the same shit going on in Alberta, where they can just go in at any time of the day, more than likely in the middle of the night, right? So that people are disoriented, freaked out, right? More willing to comply. And even if they are allowed to pack up their shit and walk off and go someplace else, like I said, it's just a matter of time before the city and the cops hunt them down and start the process all over again. All right? So, that's what this video is about, from my opinion, where they don't talk about the shit that I talk about, because they're the ones that are seedy. They're the ones that are doing insidious things. they praise the police. Oh, well, the police, they're coming with us with gang this and gang that. Yeah, right, motherfucker, okay? We got that body dude guy with his fucking gang paraphernalia and his little taser and the snuff phone, okay? All in one video with the RCMP reading his hand signals, right? With the babyface cop saying to the body dude guy, "Did you get the stuff?" What stuff? He wasn't walking out with a body. He was looking in his cell phone. Did you get the snuff? Maybe he said snuff. Instead of stuff, maybe it was SNUFF. Yeah. Yeah. And they're not talking about that, people. So anyway, they're blaming homelessness. Tent cities. They're blaming tent cities and all the junk that goes around it, okay, in terms of the mental health issues, drug addictions, thievery, tents catching on fire, gang activity, the exploitation of, minor children through, procuring of prostitution and all this other shit. They're not blaming it on homelessness in terms of no housing per se, as it is more like a social problem that's connected to the drug problem. All right, anyway, this person here wrote, they caught it too, and they just wanted to put it out there to reinforce that a lot of this shit that's going on with the homeless people is a direct result of organized religion, the overlords that come from different countries that have established wealth by any means necessary, no matter who they fucking hurt, as they participate in illegal activity like illegal organ harvesting, fentanyl sales, prostitution, all this, casino, whatever, okay, so that they can go off and buy houses and get into whatever in bed with the government, and okay. All right, and then just with the government participating in, as not the government, quote unquote, as it is the public union sector, okay, the workers, right? It wasn't David Eby who made the snuff movie happen per se at the time that it happened, in the manner that it happened at John Hart's house, although David Eby could be on the that's the premier of this province, could be on the black web paying X amount of dollars to watch it, because he sure in the hell does nothing to stop it. So if he's going to do nothing to stop it, and he knows about my lawsuit, he knows about the corruption, but he hides it like a dirty secret so it can continue to happen, so that he can keep the public union sector fat and happy, right? Then there's a very high probability that he's paying to watch it himself. All right. So anyway, there's, more homeless, more you can lure away. But now they're not just luring them away, they're rounding them up. And they're putting so many over here to make it look like it was a success story. Is this even recording? Thank God. I wouldn't want to have to do this again. If you got 400 in a camp and you are successful at taking 200 to this transition center, give them some coffee, let them have a shower, and then figure out what kind of resources you can refer them to. Perhaps you might be able to house them, but where? I don't think they've gotten that far. But besides that point, the other 200 are still roaming the streets, congregating, and as soon as they congregate, up goes the next tent city, to which the city is, and tent city, right? At which point the cops and the city are going to come and dismantle that one, but only this time it's 200 instead of 400. Now it's 200. So 100 get on the bus and 100 walk away, right? To eventually, what? It becomes illegal to be homeless in Alberta? And that's the precedence that they want to set for across Canada as they're bringing them into situations where they're like a re-education camp, right? They have to relearn how to get along in society, take their medications, follow the rules, right? If we're going to give you a module, you can't. And then if they can't, they die. And along comes the robotoid, the robotoid, the robotoid, the robotoid, the robotoid, the robotoid, the robotoid. Corner! Puts on their fake John Henry. It was suicide because the man was depressed. But don't worry, he was housed. We just won't get into the details of his housing and why it made him depressed. But even if he wasn't depressed and he was murdered, it wouldn't matter because it's a given. The cops are going to cover it up because his organs were slated for illegal organ harvesting, while the rest of his body parts, well, it's a skin suit. Illegal organ harvesting. Dog food. Maybe they need the semen. Maybe they don't just steal eggs. Maybe they steal semen too. Who knows? I'm just saying, not everything meets the eye. Right? Anyway, this person, I do believe, caught on to the doublespeak, the forked tongue. Sure, it sounded professional. It sounded like they cared. It sounded like they're coming in with a new program, something that's caring and loving. Be kind to each other, like a AKA Dr. God, Dr. Death, whatever she is to you, AKA Bonnie, Dr. Bonnie Henry, a person that doesn't have one legitimate patient in the province of British Columbia, Canada, but can tell everybody to stop fucking breathing when it's convenient for them. The public union sector, that is. Okay? Yeah. But it's not so new, because they've already done it in San Francisco. Whatever these guys are doing in Alberta, they've already done it in San Francisco. And I don't believe that 1,000 people were relocated in a kind, loving manner in the middle of the night to a safe location where they're flourishing after the fact. No, I don't. And if there are a few in there that are a quote-unquote success story, well, that's only because they're trying to cover their asses for the ones that disappeared. So, there has always been homelessness and mental illness in our society all the way back to the 150 years ago. The reason it's gotten worse has almost nothing to do with COVID. Housing is becoming more and more out of reach for our fellow Canadians. And the affordability crisis is just the most recent extreme. But make no mistake, for decades now, the rich have been getting richer and the poor poorer for a long time. Under Liberal, Conservative and NDP governments in all provinces and the country as a whole. Exactly. And these politicians, to which I'm sure many of them have already been replaced, right? Just like that fake robotoid coroner with the motherboard, the processing board in her hair. Yeah. Okay? If they can do that thing talked, people. Okay? If they can do it with a coroner, they can do it with a politician. And they have. This is my response, and this is why I'm reading it, because I don't believe it will. Well, it's a hit and miss. It may stay up, it may not. But in case that it doesn't, I'd like to document it. Yeah. All right? To that person. They, government, create the problem. Housing crisis with immigrant replacement programs that are subsidized by all levels of government. So they, public union sector workers, can benefit within the underground economy, e.g., murder by fentanyl equals illegal organ harvesting and snuff movies. Then come with a solution where everyone disappears off the streets in the middle of the night, like what happened in San Francisco, California, and without anyone seeing it happen. Because this is what they're talking about here. Now, this dude is the one doing the interview. He's interviewing a minister by the name of Jason Nixon, who he himself says he's 6 feet 8 inches tall, people. And he's going on about this program because he's trying to keep Albertans safe. Yeah. And whatever bullshit he's talking about with the homeless people, I lived in Alberta, people. Don't talk to me about, oh, they're exploiting little kids, like teenagers, you know, they're pimping teenagers out on the fucking streets and shit like that. Listen, they were pimping out fucking teenagers out in the street when I was a teenager. Okay, that's nothing new for Alberta. That's the first thing, right? Like, seriously, cops don't do jack. They're called kiddie strolls. You ever heard what a kiddie stroll is? That's 18 and under. And they can be as young as freaking 12, 13 years old. All right? Right? I'm serious. So, you know, don't act like you're trying to do something here that's like whatever, that this is a new problem with the homeless people. For fuck's sakes, I lived in a house and the homeless natives would go in my backyard underneath my trees in the bush and they'd sit there and drink their freaking Lysol. Right? Serious. So, I mean, I'm sure it's worse now though because they're bringing in all these immigrants. They're not addressing that though. No. Anyway, let's just listen for a second here because I don't want to drag this out too long. And when I watched, like when I was watching, I was listening and, you know, I was getting lulled by it, literally. Like, I'm like, oh, this is, you know, intellectually stimulating. But then on the other hand, it wasn't long before my spidey senses went up and I could see the bullshit. Like, seriously, just more freaking bullshit. All it is bullshit.
Okay, so let's ask two questions. Who are these gangs and where do they come from, right? And who's running in the drugs?
Yeah, well, they do. They have a lot of Somalians and that type of thing. Look, Julian fucking came from Alberta, right? And look what he did. He murdered Shimei. Like, come on, people. Right?
How much of that's coming from China? Who's controlling the distribution? You guys have a sense of that? And, well, let's start with that.
You know, in Alberta, the way I've been briefed with our law enforcement.
Apparently, his dad was a founder to the mustard seed, which at some point was a food bank, but I think they also did other services for the homeless people, right? So he says he walks the talk because he grew up poor, and I think even at one point he was homeless or something with his family, or maybe, and then they founded the Mustard Seed, which, you know, has chapters in other provinces, and I mean, he makes himself sound sincere, right? And, you know, he's definitely intelligent, and the one that's doing the interview is intelligent, but then, you know, there's that underbelly, people. There's that part that these guys don't talk about. Just hold on a minute. I'm so thirsty. I've got the dehydrator on. I got to get some water. Okay, I'm going to stay on this subject for a while, people, okay? In between all the other little things I might hear, you know, do and say or whatever, right? I bought two little turkeys. Oh my God, they're so small. I paid $48 for 2 freaking turkeys. Because, you know, like, my son is not the only one that's freaked out in terms of what's going on, one, in the economy in general, and just with the talk of it all, the buzz on the internet with the dollar collapsing, and, you know, with the immigrant replacement program, aka invasion, right? Where families like mine become second-class citizens in our own country, basically, as we begin to either disappear or die off, right? For the preferred citizen, to which in the United States is really getting bad, to the point where these illegal immigrants or aliens, or whatever you want to call them, are now busting down fences up along the Texas border and trampling border patrol, like literally pushing them over and running over them, like running, just whatever, like zombies. It reminds me of a zombie movie. Yeah. As they're now spreading out, squatting, moving into people's houses, people are afraid to even go grocery shopping, right? Or on a holiday. They come back from a holiday and their house is invaded with criminals, basically. Like, what happened to theft? You go to the corner store, or you go on a 2-day holiday, you come back, and because you left your house empty, all of a sudden you've got something inside of it saying, sorry, get out, it's not your house no more, I've taken it over. You call the cops, and the cops say, sorry, can't do nothing, because, you know, it's a civil suit. You take them to the Landlords and Tenancy Act branch to evict them, right? Because there's some sort of squatter law or something that gives those criminals a right to be in your house, even though they're stealing your property, right? They're being mischievous with fraud, right? Like, these are like criminal codes under federal law, but cops ain't doing shit about it because the cops are involved, people. This is what I'm trying to show you here. This thing, it is a thing. It's an imposter. It's a replacement. Has the authority to put down on a death certificate that Sierra Chorney did it to herself. But yet, wouldn't this thing and its handlers, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, at the direction of the province of British Columbia, Canada, did not allow Sierra Chorney's family to identify her body. This thing has no legitimate right, first of all, to do that. Never mind, forge, through fraud, a signature on a official document. So, for all these illegal aliens coming into the United States of America, many of them, before they cross over the border from Mexico into the United States, are leaving, remember, this is exposure. This is what his face looks like under the skin of a dead person. Because that's your skinwalker right there. Okay? Cameras don't lie, and neither does exposure. So, if you have all these so-called migrants crossing over from Mexico into the United States, and of course it's all blurred, right? I already told you, YouTube likes to blur my videos, right? Anyway, and they're leaving their little backpacks as soon as they cross over at the, the borderline, right? With their ID and everything, doesn't matter what it is, there on the ground, so that when people come to do their little reporting on it, backpack after backpack after backpack, they're finding IDs, medications, money, clothing, underwear, shoes, all of it. But what's interesting is they're leaving behind their traveling papers. Kind of makes you wonder why, right? In terms of their ID. Why would you leave your ID there on the ground before you get processed by Border Patrol? So, there's got to be some kind of fraud going on in there. Well, this is fraud, people, as plain as day. A robot has no legitimate authority to sign a death certificate. Okay? So when this minister talks about the cops, well, we know what the cops are up to because we can see it right here, people. Right? That thing walked out of the room where Sierra was supposedly dead with the 6'3", 4" female RCMP right beside it, with another one standing in the living room. Okay? This thing made sure that it was looking basically right at me and my son and my daughter. Why? Well, this thing was standing there, John Hart a little over here, and that female, whatever it was, right here. Like a hive mind. And then I guess the other one was over there. And who knows what else was in that area. And there was that, because they're always running with their Wi-Fi. So you put your video on low speed, you're going to hear it. Because they're connected somehow, some way to each other. Through that shit with the Wi-Fi. Why? Why looking? Why? Why? What was so important for it to be standing there doing that? Considering it's not even fucking real. And if they can do that, you know they can do an AKA Dr. God, Dr. Death. I'm just saying. So let's get back to this minister. Where is he? There he is. How do we know this guy is real? Seriously. How do we know, people? How do we know? Just because he said that his father was the founder of the mustard seed, which is a legitimate charity that I'm familiar with that did help people back in the day when things were more normal. But how do we know that he hasn't been replaced? How do we know, people? How can we tell? How can we tell? And considering what he's proposing with the swoop of homeless people, because he's trying to protect teenagers from being pimped out, well, I tend to disagree. Because I lived in Alberta, alright, and I know for a fact they have kiddie strolls. Okay? Nothing new under the sun. Clearly, nothing has changed. That's just the excuse to go in the middle of the night with the cops, with their robot toys. There, maybe we should call it that. Robot toys. And God knows what. So that we can all fall for the old okie dokie and go to bed at night knowing that each and every homeless person was treated with respect and none of them got injured along the way and all got housing and are all happy and safe. As if. As if. Yeah. Well, if that was the case, people, if that was the case, seriously, if that was the case, why are they doing this? Huh? Why? Believe half of what you see and none of what you hear.
Support is that we're seeing a variety of gangs, particularly indigenous gangs when you're in the Edmonton area that are operating on the street. But we also have clear evidence of actually cartels, including Mexican cartels, and some of this coming from the Asian market, to your point, all operating here within the province of Alberta. So these are pretty seriously organized gangs. A lot of that is to bring in the drugs, obviously, to our street, and then they're using our street gangs, which are often indigenous on the streets, to be able to move that product through places like tent cities.
Okay, so you made reference to the Mexican cartels. Let's start with the Mexican cartels and the Asian supply. Do you have any more details on either of those fronts? It's a lovely...
Are they talking about South Asians? Because you know there's a lot of Hindus and Punjabis and that type of people moving into Alberta. Or are they talking about Chinese? And those kind of, like the triads and that type of thing. Right? or maybe both groups. I mean, it's just what I mean. When they're talking, they sound like they're very well choreographed, and they're very intellectual, and they really do put on a good spiel, a very good spiel. But that's all it is, people, is a spiel. There's some seedy shit going on in the background here. They're relying too much on cops to be honorable and respectable and ethical when, well, I'd like to say we, but many of us know otherwise. There's a reason why they called them pigs. Now I know why, people.
Thing to imagine now that the Mexican cartels are operating not only in the southern U.S. but in Alberta itself. That's a real accomplishment on our part.
And those robotoids, they had them up with that truckers convoy too. You could almost say that Mr. Toucan, the one that they kept dressing up in different costumes for video shoots to promote their policing professionalism. Yeah, right. I'm pretty sure that was a robotoid too. It was something. It wasn't human though.
Must say. And so Mexican cartel.
And if it was a crossbred of something. Yeah. Because remember, it would just whip its head like a freaking rooster. A chicken with a toucan nose. Yeah.
Cartels and Asian supply. I presume the Asian supply is mostly associated with fentanyl?
Yes, that is correct.
So they're blaming probably the Chinese, but you know the ones from India, the South Asians, East Indians, South Asians, whatever, they doing it too.
And, the best person in our government to talk to about this is obviously our public safety minister, who's managing this closely and be the one giving us this information.
Yeah,
but we certainly have clear evidence of cartels bringing drugs, particularly across our southern border. And frankly, we're now starting to see inside our province where we're becoming an exporter of things like fentanyl. So some of the products are being brought up here to be made on our side of the line.
Yeah, finally somebody said that they're actually making it in the province. Oh, I've been saying it for years. They're making it in BC too. You don't need to wait for the Chinese to be shipping it in on a shipping container. It's being made out here, for crying out loud, people.
And then now brought back even down to the south, which is quite a new thing for the province of Alberta. But certainly, it explains some of the circumstances.
The camera ends up getting all blurred. No, can't handle it. But if I go in closer, but then you start seeing lines. And then I bring out my magnifying glass, like the good old days. All right.
That we're seeing in our province. And I would say, Jordan, that Edmonton for us, which our capital city, is probably one of our smaller drug problems. So, one of the bigger areas we're seeing some of our largest drug problems on the street is actually in Lethbridge, which interestingly enough is the closest city to the American border, a large city in our province to the American.
Yeah, they have a lot of homeless people, because they're being displaced. There's no affordable housing, so of course that aggravates and agitates and, manufactures more numbers to be drug addicted with mental health issues, which keeps them out on the streets longer and easier for other people to prey on them, whether they're the handlers on a petty fucking drug dealer level or whether it's the fucking ranky cops. Okay? Like, come on.
American border, and really I think is a proof point.
Like, these kind of individuals, they're so out of touch with reality. But you see, that's the thing, though. They're not out of touch with reality. They are in partnership with the white-collar criminals, whether it's through the organized religion or whether it's through the public union sector and affiliated groups. Okay?
That some of that drugs is starting there because of what's taking place on the border, which is why we're seeing some of the most potent and deadly drugs inside the Lethbridge area as it works its way into the street culture.
Right, so maybe I should also...
Well, how does that apply to BC? Is it coming in from Washington?
at some point talk to the public safety
Or is it coming in from Alberta?
minister. So, okay, and then you mentioned indigenous gangs. Okay, so now when I lived in Alberta in the 1980s, now that's getting to be quite a long time ago, 40 years ago, there weren't organized indigenous street gangs, or if there were very few of them. I mean, Edmonton was a stunningly safe place with the exception of a few blocks downtown, which by, say, American standards were still relative.
Well, you had affordable housing. You weren't being overrun by immigrants taking over everything, right? Didn't matter if they were being subsidized by all levels of government or if they're coming in with money and just buying up the property because, you know, they're being brought in by the government to do that. My son had a word for that. You know, they cut backroom deals with Chinese politicians and Indian China, you know, from India, right? Those politicians to have their rich people come over here and start buying up everything. It's little by little, surely by surely, right? And now there's nothing left. No. And what little left is being regurgitated with the immigrants coming in. And they're using Canadians and body parts, fentanyl sales, prostitution, whatever, however, but a lot of it's illegal organ harvesting, people. It really is, right? And clearly, they need bodysuits for their robotoids because they're not putting on synthetic. No, they're experimenting with our bodies. They really are.
American downtown dangerous standards was still pretty civilized. There was just not a problem. So what shifted in Alberta, and what is the makeup and origin of these indigenous gangs?
Well, I think what's shifted is the money in the drug markets. For sure would provide more ability for gangs to become more and more organized. And, you know, the police have been out in our province very clearly establishing who these gangs are, and they're the ones who are giving me as...
So what? The police run the shacks, people.
As a cabinet minister.
They run snuff movies, people, as they have their robotoid freaking coroners sign the paperwork that the victim did it to themselves, people. Why don't these individuals talk about that crap?
That information.
Oh, because he doesn't know, does he? No. It's too outlandish.
Of what is taking place there. I mean, obviously, my job is to provide that social services support to individuals within these tent cities, but we're working closely with the police who are the ones coming and briefing us about the dangers of gangs. And there is no doubt in the city of Edmonton, but also across our province, that we continue to see that organ.
Do you hear how professional he sounds? Huh? Almost convincing.
Gang element increasing. My personal view is, and I think the police would agree with me, that a lot of that is being driven obviously by drugs. And, you know, as I think you know, I used to work in a homeless shelter. I grew up in a homeless shelter. My father is the founder of one of the largest homeless shelters and organizations that work with the poor in Western Canada here in Calgary called the Mustard Seed.
Yeah, and they were also in Victoria, BC, right? They have a few chapters. Yeah. So, you know, that's convincing. You listen to that, you know, you you feel like, oh, the guy must be a good guy. Yeah.
And we did not see anything like this type of drug activity even 15 years ago. We would never have imagined.
We never seen robotoids walking among us acting like coroners either, but we do now.
Spot where we would see individuals working within shelters.
You see, they don't have to pay that individual a wage. They don't have to pay that thing a superannuation life insurance policy. And if they do, on the books, it's somebody else getting that money. Okay? Because when the government does its fiscal budget, those things are always paid first. But how the hell can you pay a robotoid anything? All it requires is an electrical plug to recharge the battery and a little bit of maintenance and a little bit of touch-up here and there every now and then on the skin. Doesn't need a bath, doesn't require food for substance, unless of course there's something else living inside of it that likes to suck on other things. But other than that, it's not going to eat. Maybe that's why, they're fading out food, people. They're fading out fucking food, right? Everybody's all stressed out, wondering where they're going to be getting their protein in the next 5 to 10 years from now, right? They're trying to get rid of carbon. Yeah, well, we are carbon. So what does that tell you, right? Maybe they like bugs, but I don't.
Multiple overdoses a day, and sometimes multiple fatalities in a week inside their facilities. And that just shows you what's changed as far as the drug market, which is logical, what is driving this organized crime element because of the money that would be involved in that.
Okay, so let's delve a little bit into the contribution of federal policy into producing this situation. So I know that the situation that you're describing in Alberta is even more out of hand, let's say, in British Columbia, especially in Vancouver. And Vancouver is a much bigger city with a much darker center. I mean, Vancouver had some downtown places that were like seriously bad 40 years ago. And that's certainly spreading on the western coast. Now, my understanding is that Canada at the federal level in some ways took a page from some of the European countries that were experimenting with
All in all, it's a good interview. I am enjoying listening to it because it's very intellectual. However, it's superficial. And it's lopsided. Because it doesn't clean the swamp. Well, I suppose it depends on what swamp you're trying to clean, though, right?
Criminalizing drug use. Now, I have some sympathy for that viewpoint because it isn't obvious to me that the so-called war on drugs was a success, and I think that its attempt to crack down too brutally on users of, at least in the past, somewhat more benign substances like cannabis, and I mean benign in comparison to alcohol, say, which is legal, I think a fair bit of that was misguided. But I do know that countries like Portugal, for example, that spearheaded this, they didn't just reduce the penalties for drug use and distribution, let's say sales and distribution. They did that in concert with what seemed to be the kind of things that you guys are trying to pull off in Alberta, right? It wasn't like the Portuguese allowed people to be stoned out of their mind derelicts on the streets just because they stopped criminalizing use of even...
Okay, that's not really what I want to hear. I want to hear about the new program. I'll leave the link for this, okay? It is intellectually stimulating, but then on the other hand, like I said, it's shallow, in my opinion, because it's lopsided with the criminal aspect around what they're talking about in the great grand scheme of human trafficking, human trafficking of body parts, and whatever else revolves around those two key areas when it comes to the underground economy and propping up the so-called middle class, to whom many of those individuals are actually the public union sector worker themselves. All right? And in light of what represents the public union sector, to which nobody is being honest about, it kind of makes you wonder where its pension plan is going to go to, where its superannuation life insurance policy is going to go to, where its quote-unquote paycheck is going to go to, being it doesn't require a paycheck because it's not even freaking real, people. It's a robot toy that is being used by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police to commit a crime. And I'm sure it's more than one crime under the Criminal Code of Canada. And it's not just a rogue group within the RCMP as a whole. You're talking a federal agency in partnership with corrupt governments to commit fraud. This is a form of fraud. But it goes further than that, though, people. Well, this dude wants to make it where he can have his fraudsters. This dude, now I'm getting mad. This dude wants to make it where his fraudsters, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, can come in the middle of the night at any time of the hour on any day of the week, with or without robotoids or not, because you'll never know, because they're not honest. They won't tell you, and just expect people to get on a white bus to be taken to some... Oh, let me find it. Hold on a minute. Okay, well, it seems like he's jumping into it here pretty soon, so I'm not going to go through this whole video, right? Because personally, I find it, even though it sounds intellectual and whatever, and I know the truth. So let's just listen and see if we can jump in with what he's saying here.
Eventually you're going to OD. This is why inside medical facilities, even where people are taking fentanyl, often paid for by the government, or other types of chemicals like that, you'll have to have nurses there to be able to interact with overdoses. Our government really believes we need to go the other way, which is that we need to reach out to individuals in this circumstance. We need to invest in resources that they will need to deal with root causes that have caused their circumstances, and give them a way to be able to recover. And that's where it comes. But I think the 10 cities prove that we're right, because the reality is, if anybody thinks putting an individual in tents in minus 50 degrees Celsius in Canada is a safe way to live, with propane tanks exploding and people burning to death and all the things that I have just described today, that is more safer than what Alberta is saying, which is come on into the shelters, let's get resources around you, and let's help you get better. And you know what's interesting, Jordan, is the individuals that are coming out of the encampments, most of them actually want what we're bringing forward. And that's why in the last 3 weeks, as we've done encampments, over 200 of those individuals coming out have gone to what we call our navigation centers, so they can navigate support.
Navigation center. So they're going and they're picking them up off the street, gathering up their belongings, letting them know that They're not going to be thrown out. Get up on the bus. We'll take you to a navigation center. Now keep in mind, this is just random. You've been living out in the tent city for who knows how long, and then all of a sudden, out of the blue, these people show up and you don't have a choice. Except for maybe, I suppose, you could pack up your shit and walk away. But you know they're going to follow you. It's just a matter of time, right? Okay, so let's listen.
They've received over 500 referrals to different services. Many of them now are in permanent housing type of service.
Okay, so they go to the navigation center. They receive 500 different referrals. They're just getting referrals. That's it. They get a cup of coffee, a sandwich, a bowl of soup, maybe a turkey dinner, who knows. They get a chance to have a shower. I don't know if they get to sleep in terms of laying down on a cot. Some of them do, probably, but many of them probably sit at a table and sleep sitting up until they're asked to leave or whatever. And then they meet with a social worker and they get 500 referrals, and it sounds like some of them get housing, to which more than likely they'd be modules with rules.
Circumstances, actively working on their recovery, dealing with the medical circumstances that may be around them, and ultimately many of them will go on to have productive lives. That's what we want. That's you.
Ultimately, many of them. He didn't say all of them. What happens to the ones that don't make it?
What the other side is selling is just accepting that somebody's going to die and giving them a death sentence. I like that you use those words, because I think it's true. That's the result of what they're doing.
No doubt about it, yeah.
You
Well,
will
there's
not
always
survive
made
that.
if that fails, you know, so.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so let's.
No. My daughter didn't choose to die. She didn't want to die. She told me she didn't want to die. But I couldn't. I did everything I could possibly do. I couldn't stop the conniving and the scamming and the scheming and the plotting that was going on with the RCMP and John Hart and the courthouse that set her up for failure, and, you know, just the public union sector in general, people, with that organized religion. Yeah, because it's a syndicate. He talking about organized crime. Yeah, well, there's crime within that organization that he works for. Yeah.
Now, I was interested in talking to you in part so that we could walk through a description of the tent cities, and then even more importantly,
and I've been watching his mouth, eh? I'm trying to ignore it, though. Yeah. He's got his eyes down. Yeah. As a matter of fact, he gave this really weird shit-looking whatever, and I don't know, people. Like, this is just, I don't know, what do they call it, a dog and pony show?
shed some light on the fact that such cities are almost immediately taken over by the most psychopathic gangs you can possibly imagine. That's an important thing to establish, because it eradicates the notion that this is some kind of compassionate approach to these poor, unhoused people who are just trying to live, you know, in a happy community. No, wrong. Okay, but mostly why I wanted to talk to you was on the remediation and treatment side. So the first thing I want to ask you is about your sociological goal. Now, you implied at the beginning of this conversation that there aren't going to be any more tent cities in Alberta. Now, is that the goal? Like to return to 30 years ago, say, where there weren't tent cities. That just didn't happen. You know, there's the odd person under a bridge. There's the odd homeless person. It was very, very rare. There certainly weren't communities of homeless people. So is your government's goal to attain that end? And if so, how far along are you, and what's your timeline?
So, yes, our goal is to make sure that we are not seeing dangerous tent cities inside our cities. You know, I can't outright say that we would ever be able to fully eliminate, tent cities could pop up at any time, but that we would stop in the future this being the management tool to help with this population, and instead that we would invest in proper resources. And most importantly, what our government's doing that I think is courageous is that we're actually stepping in as a subnational government to support a municipal police.
Subnational government to support a municipal. Subnational. Why is he making it national? Subnational government. No, you're a provincial government. Subnational, it should be sub-provincial. Anyway, subnational government. What? To support municipal.
Police force to take down.
Police force to take down. So they're using the RCMP, which is a national force. That's why he's saying subnational. Yeah. They're using the RCMP, which is a federal force, to take down
those encampments.
Those municipal encampments. And what do the RCMP like to employ when they're putting their John Henry down on death certificates? That which isn't even human. And this is why I wanted to do this video. Because I know the truth. I was there. And by the grace of God, my camera picked it up and showed me what was in front of me all along. And exposure doesn't lie. But people do. And so do robots. So I don't trust him. Because he's in bed with the devil, in my opinion. I don't care what his family roots were. He's probably been replaced, and he just doesn't know it yet.
And we're going to do that for two different reasons. One is to help the individuals in, which I'll get to in a minute, the individuals that are in those encampments. But second, to help.
To help some. Hopefully many of them. But not all of them. He already admitted that. So that means that's going to be a surplus of dead bodies that somebody's going to capitalize off of. You do realize that, right? Don't let a good crisis go to waste.
Help our citizens who live in places like Edmonton. Edmontonians don't deserve to have this in their community anymore. They deserve to be able to walk down the...
Yeah, well, you could say I'm an Edmontonian because I was born in Edmonton. I have a right to be able to affordable housing. But through the corruption of government, the public union sector, organized religion, all screwing each other, that they've taken that right away from me and my family. And we're facing homelessness so this guy can get up on fucking YouTube and talk about saving us after we go mad. Right? They can only wish and hope that we become drug addicted because then they can sell it to the public. Their bullshit crap. Basically. Right?
The streets and feel safe. The last 3 weeks as we tore down encampments, Jordan,
So the last 3 weeks we've been tore down encampments. So they're doing it hardcore now.
Our team with the city of Edmonton collected 129 tons of garbage.
129 tons of garbage. But yet they're saying that they're allowing people to take their belongings. How the fuck does that work? How can you get 129 tons of garbage by taking down tent cities, but yet let people walk off with their belongings. What? They get a shirt, a pair of pants, a backpack, maybe a pair of boots, and a blanket. Everything else is garbage. Garbage is a very loose term. Really, it is. Oh, the teddy bear? That's garbage. Get rid of it. There's no room at the, what did they call that center?
Out of these tent cities alone, including 3,000 needles. So it just shows you what is taking.
Yeah, well, who gives them the needles? Who's running the drugs on the streets? Who's running the shacks? Let's be real about it.
Place inside those tent cities and how dangerous it is to the rest of the community. But we want to go one step further. We want to then make sure these individuals receive.
Well, I'll tell you something. Usually when people are in that situation, they kind of keep that shit to themselves, basically where they live, for the most part.
Full wraparound supports and the best opportunities that they can to overcome the situation that they find themselves in.
Okay,
We're not
so-
delusional.
Okay,
we do
so
realize
we'll go-
there's still going to be homeless people, but
Right.
we don't believe it should be this many.
Okay, so we'll go to the treatment of individuals in a moment. So I want to flesh out the sociological element a bit more first.
He's got wet lips.
First of all,
Oh, I'm sorry, dry lips. When they lick their lips, that's like a dog licking its lips looking at a pork chop. He's talking about homeless people. Ching ching, ching ching, smacking those lips.
I'd like to ask you, one of the things that's happening in Toronto is that the tent cities increasingly occupy public spaces. And I think that's utterly inexcusable because I don't believe.
Yeah, but you also don't allow people to use it set up on private spaces. Because then the city starts harassing the private home, like the private landowner. Right? Code this, code that, and code. So you're being hypocritical here, right? If you're not going to allow them to be on private property, where else are they supposed to go? Oh, I know, on the white bus, right? To get re-educated, where many of them, I suppose, will make it, where some of them don't. But where do they end up? Well, we've got the Robotoid put into John Henry. Whatever happened was an accident. Oh, sorry, it was a suicide.
That the municipality, for example, has a right to either take away parks from people, including children who use those parks more than any other people and need them, especially in the cities. They certainly don't have the right to take those away. They don't have the right to take them away and award them to other people.
So he's just playing devil's advocate here?
And have no contractual right to them whatsoever.
He's making people
mad. And they
mad.
also don't have the right to fail to protect those parks. And so tell me where you saw the tent cities emerging and what that meant just in terms of occupation of land for the people, say, in the surrounding neighborhoods.
So I've seen tent cities emerge in many different type of locations within the city, but you're right. Most often it ends up inside the green spaces in the city. And I know you know Edmonton, so the beautiful river valley of the North Saskatchewan River that flows right through that city.
Okay, I'm going to come back to the next part that I want you to hear.
That's areas where people go and jog. And I think what's happened over time is if they're on that side of, and that's
basically they're talking about their police. They're trying to make it sound like that the Edmonton police are like a district police and separate from the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, to which some of these policing agencies are like that. Like in where I live in Surrey, it was a big, debate as to whether they were going to get rid of the RCMP as the main policing force in the district of Surrey, whereas in Delta, they have their own police force that are not employed by the RCMP head office. However, if the RCMP was dismantled in Surrey, and they got fired because that's federal, right? Royal Mounted Police, Royal Canadian Mounted Police is a federal policing agency that is paid for by the province through transfer payments as well as through the municipalities. And then some municipalities choose to create their own policing forces, fire the RCMP. But then what happens is those same guys that were working for the RCMP, many of them jump on with the new policing agency and with the municipality. That's what they're talking about, kind of like the different police agencies, right? But, you know, so what? Police or police or police or police, right? Like, that's just a smokescreen, another freaking dog and pony show, people.
Their ideology on that side of the political spectrum, certainly they're going to start to believe in some of these ideas, which is that, you know, somehow you can magically help somebody get better by giving them the poison that's killing them over and over. But I want to also, though, be clear.
Talking about cities that support safe injection sites versus corralling them up off the freaking streets in the middle of the night, throwing away tons and tons of garbage, which is yet to be determined as to what's garbage and what's not garbage when it belongs to somebody else, right? You know, right? I'm sure they only allow a certain amount of belongings for these people to bring with them on the bus.
Clear.
We haven't gotten to that part yet.
Coming maybe even from a good spot.
He's a conservative, I think.
Individuals truly believe that this will help these individuals get better sometimes. But the reality is that they're not looking at it.
I don't believe that. Because, well, the reason I don't believe it is because there is a tremendous danger in using a false compassion to elevate your own moral virtue publicly. And
yeah, well, there's a great danger with what's really going on in the underbelly of politics these days when they've got robotoids posing as legitimate corners that are not only getting paid on the, you know, within the fiscal budget. Who's making that money off of the robotoid? Because you know that robotoid is getting paid, right? It's coming right off the fucking top. All public union sector workers get paid first before anything and anybody else. The roads don't get fixed. The schools don't get repaired. None of that crap happens until the public union sector is paid with their wages, their increases, their benefits, dental, health care, their perks, right? And then you got their pension plans. And then if they go disability, long-term disability, they get their long-term disability. And then they get their freaking superannuation life insurance policies, right? What the hell does a robotoid need with all that, people? So where's that money going? But nobody knows that they're actually putting robotoids in positions of a coroner or perhaps a conservative minister. Or maybe a health officer. Or how about a fucking premier? I'm sorry, boo-boo premier. If they can do it with the coroner, they can do it with anything and anybody. And the taxpayers are paying for those positions. But where does the money go? China? Or maybe India? The United Emirates? Or, oh well, you know that one that's warring on Gaza right now? How about maybe there? Huh? What do you think? It's not the United States of America, unless, of course, maybe it's Obama. Or it could be the Clintons. Who knows? Maybe the Bush family? Or is it BlackRock? Like, come on.
There are ancient prescriptions against doing such things. So the third commandment, depends on how you count them, is to not use God's name in vain. And what that really
I
means
want you to hear
do not
how they're picking them up.
Moral.
That's probably the better compassionate way to do it, because they don't have all the details that I have. But then when you hear the details that I just present, you got to be going, well, actually, that conservative government's right. I mean, do you want my approach, which is to reach in, send a warm bus load everybody up, bring them to...
Reach in, send in a warm bus. Think of San Francisco in the middle of night. Nobody seen it coming. It just showed up, and all of a sudden, everybody just up and disappeared. Oh, but they went to got their 500 referrals, got their coffee, got to have a shower, right? You know what I'm saying? Let's listen.
A nice warm facility, give them shower, foods, and access to medical resources, treatment, including rehabilitation treatment for their addiction, or to be left inside a tent freezing to death, taking poison, right? And that's what I mean by that. I think, that ends up creating a spot where very good people then end up supporting this approach because they don't, they're everyday people, they're working. They just watch this on the news and they go, hey, well, that maybe makes sense. And they don't understand that in the end, they're ended up supporting an ideology that's actually killing people.
Yeah, no.
So in other words, he's the conservative government. He doesn't want to give people a choice. They're just going to show up with the local police, whether it's a district police or whether it's the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. It doesn't really freaking matter because they're all one birds of a feather flocked together. You know that both groups have their robotoids employed somewhere. We don't know where the money is going because a robotoid doesn't need the money, but it's getting a paycheck, okay? Whoever is controlling it is getting the paycheck, people. All right. And then they just show up with the cops, round everybody up onto the bus, take them off to some center to have a coffee, have a shower, get some medicine if they need it, right? They may or may not get rehabilitation services, but we already know there's not that many recovery houses. There are not that many detox centers. Okay, let's face it, because if there was a lot of recovery houses available, a lot of detox centers available, they wouldn't have these problems with these people on the streets. Hell, even if there was an actual housing market where you could rent basement suites, apartments, a house that's affordable, half of those people, 3/4 of those people wouldn't even be on the streets. This is hogwash. It's a smokescreen to cover up the corruption within the housing market that's laundering body parts through the black market to prop up more corruption. And that's why they gotta bring in their robotoids to put a fake fucking signature on death certificates.
Look, I agree. I think that's exactly why I wanted to do this podcast. And now I think we should get to the nitty-gritty.
See, it all sounds so intellectual. It all sounds so political and, well, I don't know, correct? Right? You know what I'm saying? It sounds, if we just take care of each other and look out for each other and help each other, we'll all get along and be happy. Yeah, right. They're only telling you half the story. Not even a half. They're telling you a quarter of the story, people.
Which is not that all of this was irrelevant, but the real relevant issue here is...
My battery's going to run out here in a minute. Or not, the hard disk space.
What are you doing that's going to work? So let me give a preamble to this. So for everyone...
Preamble, what a big word.
Listening. There's a concatenation of two major problems here.
Concatenation.
First problem is that antisocial behavior and drug use overlap. And so why is that a problem? Well, the first problem is there is not...
Well, I don't know. Homelessness, running the streets with no place to go, being abused and used by everybody under the sun, right? Running on fear 24/7. Oh, I'm sure that plays a real number on your freaking brain, right? But we'll just ignore that fact, right?
Nothing.
They act like we didn't have drug addicts in the 80s. We didn't have drug addicts in the 90s or alcoholics or any of that crap. We didn't have drug addicts in the 2000s. Hell no. Just all of a sudden, well, based on what they got to say, in the last 3 years. No, it's been longer than freaking 3 years, people. The difference between 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago was you could actually afford to rent a house. You could afford to rent a decent basement suite. You could afford to rent an apartment, whether you were an alcoholic or a freaking addict. And life went on. But you can't afford those anymore. So when you throw them out onto the streets and you put fear into them constantly 24/7, if they're not getting it from the city, they're getting it from the cops. If they're not getting it from the cops, they're getting it from the freaking the handlers, the little druggie handlers, the gangbanger handlers. And if it's not that, they're getting it from the hospitals when they go to the hospital and they get mistreated and then sent back out onto the streets to be abused again over and 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 over again. Okay? They only tell 1/4 of the freaking story.
Thing in the psychological literature that's more intractable to treatment once it's established than antisocial / criminal behavior, and there's absolutely no indication.
Some people you can't save because they just are what they are. But don't put everybody into one freaking barrel. And that's what they do, as they ignore the housing situation, which ultimately pushes more people out onto the street, so they have a steady supply of bodies to capitalize on in one way or another. Ching ching, ching ching with the body snatchers.
In the clinical literature that it can be ameliorated. So, for example, the standard penological doctrine of well-versed criminologists is that
Basically, what he's doing is he's criminalizing each and every homeless person out on the streets to say that there's something deviant about all of them, and therefore, when in fact it's just a small percentage. Because the majority, if not all of those individuals, are a victim to non-affordable housing. And our governments have made it worse now because, they just keep on bringing in the preferred citizen that doesn't come from this country as they forward their assets, public tax dollars, to prop up those preferred citizens, immigrants, to replace the Canadian-born people, because we are the ones that are the commodity for the underground economy, as we're being used and abused and victimized. It's called victimizing the victim.
A truly repeat offender who has an antisocial history stemming...
Okay, so he's focusing on a truly repeat offender. Yeah, so what? Every single homeless person is a repeat offender? Well, I suppose when they go into breach, they have a court date, but they can't make it because they're not feeling well. They are homeless, and, regardless of where they're sleeping or how they're sleeping, chances are they're not, they lose a sense of time. They just get lost they forget. Went through that with Sierra, but that didn't make her a repeat offender. But I guess in the court's mind, you breached, you didn't show up for court, you didn't see your probation officer, well, you're going back to jail. Yup. Oh, we let you out and then you did it again. Well, there you go. So this is what he's talking about. No, this is what they created. You like that, eh, Amari?
Back into like early teenagehood or even before in the form of bullying and violent behavior as a child, the best thing to do with them, since no treatment works, is basically to incarcerate them till they burn out in their late 20s. And people can shrug their shoulders and get squawky about that and bitch about it all they want, but I would have been thrilled if I would have gone through the research literature and found any exceptions to that absolutely dismal prognostication in the 30 years I've analyzed the literature.
Do you see how intellectual he sounds, how professional he sounds? But he basically broad swept the total population of homeless individuals into one pile of shit. And he sidetracked away from the larger issue of why there's so many of them out there. In terms of human beings that aren't robotoids. Huh?
And have been unable to do so.
I mean, for all we know, this could be a robotoid too. We don't know. I told you that thing talked.
It's very, 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 very difficult to treat antisocial behavior. Okay, then you add the next layer of complication, which is difficult as it is to treat antisocial behavior, it's perhaps equally difficult to treat drug and alcohol addiction. Alcohol often being primary among the problems that are difficult to treat. There's no evidence whatsoever, generally speaking, that residential treatment centers, for example, have any beneficial long-term effect. They do function to get people off alcohol while they're in the centers, but almost invariably what happens is that when you put the people treated back into their old environment, they instantly relapse. Now, this is not to say that no one ever recovers, because most people do, in fact, straighten back up. But it isn't obvious at all how treatment can do that. So that puts policy people like you in a really tough bind, because you're dealing with a population that's very, very, very hard to serve. And so the first thing I would like to know, you talked about these uni-service centers. So I would like to know...
Uni-service centers.
Just what does it mean to offer people treatment? How do you tear down these tent cities? Exactly. Like, what are the nuts and bolts involved in that? The process. You're like, what do you do? Do you go in there and just like...
Yeah, let's listen.
Tell me how you
and
clean
then I'm
up
going
the
to end
cities,
this
and then
video.
tell me
I'm not going through it all.
how it is that people are directed into treatment. And then we'll get into the worst problem of, like, does it actually work?
So I'll start with how we're dealing with it. And now Edmonton's where we're piloting this approach.
Edmonton is where we're piloting this approach. Now remember, it's already been done in San Francisco. It's already been done. And this is what pisses me off, because he's trying to make it sound like it's something they figured out. No, this is that beehive bzzz between our governments that are interconnected, whether Canada, United States, municipal, federal, provincial, because birds of a feather flock to fucking together. I told you it's being done by the public union sector and their affiliates.
I think we're going to...
In terms of illegal organ harvesting. You need the resources and the workforce and the facilities be able to even do what they do. Okay? An unlimited amount of resources. Whether it's the workforce, the facilities in terms of hospitals and ambulances and cops and coroners, all that stupid crap. Right? And you need the supply, the surplus. The supply, right? Right? And when you got a surplus of supply, then it becomes easy pickings.
Mimic it elsewhere in our province, because we are pretty excited about the results. But let me tell you what we do first. So obviously my social services team at the Ministry of Social Services is in contact with the police. The police inform us that the encampment is coming down, and they deal with the law enforcement side of that. So deal with any elements that they may encounter in there that obviously need to be arrested, warrant issues that are taking place.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
They handle law enforcement, but we're
So
there.
they move in? Like, okay, so they make
come
a
in,
decision. And what are the laws?
Arresting people for breaching, for not showing up to court, for not going to see their probation officer, because they're sitting up in some tent sick, dope sick, right? Maybe have an infection, right? Maybe got beat, right? You know, are crashing because, you know, that's not where they want to be, but what can you do, right? And this guy's ears aren't matching up, okay? I'm telling you, this guy's ears are not matching up. Tell me, look at that. Do you not see that, people? His face is looking almost pretty straight on. All right? He's another one of those, potato heads? I did a video on that. Didn't YouTube take it down? And then I put it up on BitChute. I don't know. Yeah. It was some European politician or Australian politician or something back in the day with that stuff. And if you notice, some of these guys, they all kind of look the same. It's like they use the same kind of template when they bring in their CGI or whatever it's called. Their little holograms. Who knows? You don't know what's fucking real. But you know what? Again, exposure really does help to determine that. Oh, yeah.
Which they're... Under what legal pretext do they move in? Why do they have the right to do this?
So two issues that we primarily use. One is around just straight up by law enforcement. And, you know, there's obviously rules about you being able to just go build structures in different municipalities.
So they're using by law enforcement.
And the second and more common one of late, from my understanding, is around fire safety issues. I mean, we have had some pretty serious fires and propane tank explosions. The numbers are quite staggering. And so it is a legitimate fire issue. And so the police have to come in. They're not the firefighters, obviously, but the police have to come in because of the safety issues that are involved.
Now, do you warn the people beforehand? And how many policemen do you need per number of tent city occupants? What are the logistics here?
Yeah, so the city of Edmonton has an encampment policy where they were trying to put upon the police, I believe, to provide 72 hours notice that they were going to go into those tent cities.
Okay.
This is something we actually disagreed with because the reality was that just caused people either to move. It certainly gave a heads up to that organized crime element that there was about to be law enforcement activity. And so, you know...
Exactly, it's a fucking ambush. They're ambushing people. You heard it for yourself. We don't want them to know that we're coming. We don't want to give them a heads up in case they move. They might be a nice guy or they might be a gang member. It doesn't matter. We want to catch them if they breach their probation office appointment. Right? You understand? This is a freaking ambush. Isn't that what they did in San Francisco? Just up and ambushed people? And then smoothed it over by making it sound like it was some lovey-dovey, all-caring, let me give you a cup of coffee and you can have a shower and you may or may not get a place to stay. But don't worry, we're going to tuck you away like a dirty freaking secret and nobody will ever know the truth.
Since we...
And if you should die, that's okay. We've got, our Robotoid corner to sign your death certificate to say you did it to yourself. Yeah. That's exactly what's going to happen because that's what's been happening.
And there was a court case taking place in our province from some activist groups who were trying to stop the police from being able to do this or enforce notice requirements. The city of Edmonton and the police actually won that case, and that has allowed us to be able to go in and be able...
Yeah. They got their fucking right in the freaking Parliament building in California with, what's his name, Nixon. Right? Don't be surprised.
to address this without notice. And so what happens is, obviously, we're notified. We arrive with the police. And when I say we, I mean social workers and our team that are designed to support.
Well, yeah, you have to show that you're the nice guy, right? You created the fucking problem by bringing in all these immigrants, making it so that they bought up all the houses, or they're renting all the houses with the assistance of your government and any other government, just so that you got a surplus of Canadian fucking losers, so that you can go in there and do what you want with them when nobody's looking and capitalize off of body parts, because that's what you're doing. Otherwise, you'd have a legitimate coroner working in the freaking office instead of a robotoid. Where's the money going for the paycheck that pays the robotoid to do the job of a human? You can't trust a robotoid, and nor can you trust the Royal Canadian Mounted Police or any other thing that fucking attaches itself to a freaking robotoid. Okay, so I emptied out this hard drive on this little flash drive, hard disk, whatever this little thing is called, this little SD card or whatever, on his camera. So, because it's taking longer than I expected, but seriously, people, this is important. It's more than important. It's crucial. It's crucial. Now, we know YouTube is shadow banning my channel, shadow banning my videos. My viewer count is very low, whereas on BitChute, I get a fair amount of views compared to YouTube, that's for sure. But ain't nobody saying anything, right? Because that controlled opposition on BitChute really doesn't want to bring this shit out into the light. They don't, people. Okay? They just run in their mouths with a whole bunch of freaking game to either do the predictive programming or to instill fear into the general public and keep them guessing, where I'm showing you that these things are among us. And not only are they among us, but taxpayers are footing the bill, where this thing, with its fake signature on official death certificates, right? Not to mention the shenanigans around the death certificate, or even the death for that matter, is getting a paycheck and is entitled to a pension plan and is entitled to go on to long-term disability and is entitled to get a superannuation life insurance policy in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, not to mention severance packages and buyouts as the years go by. The only thing is it's not a living being. It's not real. It doesn't require any of that. All it requires is to recharge its battery and some maintenance, and maybe take off the old skin and put on new skin, because they haven't quite perfected their technology where they can skin a human, put it on one of these things, and keep it for life. They haven't been able to make lifer skins yet. They just haven't. So what does that tell you? They need a steady supply of body parts. And they do. They take teeth from cadavers and they put human teeth into these things because they took out Shimei's teeth. Alright. So, I'm not saying this dude that we're watching is one of these things, but you know what? Don't underestimate it. If they can do it with the coroner, they can do it with the politician. And that's why things are so messed up, and these things want us to eat bugs, because they don't eat. They don't need to. They need to have their gears greased. Unless, of course, there's something inside of them, like a parasite, that needs a, it hides in a den. It hides in the throat. That's why you get these bulges, maybe, or these things that come out of the mouth every now and then. Videos don't lie. I'm just saying. But just keep in mind what I'm talking about. There is nothing real about those eyes. They don't even have pupils, people. Tell me where there's a pupil. If there was a pupil, you would see it. All right. Not to mention the motherboard. Or if you don't want to call it a motherboard, okay? If you don't want to call it a motherboard, you can call it a processing board in its hair. Okay? Now I'm busy right now. So I can't go to that VCR. But when I do, I'm going to record it with its lid on. As a matter of fact, I'm going to do 2 different VCRs. I'm going to record it with its lid on. And I think they're 2 different colors. One has got black metal, like metal with black paint on it. And the other one is metal with a kind of a grayish silver paint. And I'm going to record it. And I'm going to find a way, the time, right? To crop it. And then we're going to take it to exposure. And we're going to see if we can see through the metal, people. All right? And then I'm going to take off the lid. And I'm going to show you what a processing board looks like. And what a motherboard looks like. This little thing right here is in motherboards. They're on processing boards. These little tube-looking things down here, I can't see it in this video, this picture, but those little tube things, those are fuses, people. Okay? This here, there's these things. I'm telling you, I've taken enough electronics apart to know what I'm freaking looking at. Okay? So let's get back. I'm going to call this one something to do with ambush. Yeah, because they're just ambushing human beings that are in a very vulnerable position, to where there are not just gang member handlers, but also the police. And it doesn't matter if it's a district police or if it's the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, because they're all the same. They're all interconnected with that bzzz, and whatever this dude is thinking that he's coming up with his, well, we've been just doing this for 3 weeks. Yeah, no, you already had this happen in Alberta. I mean, in California and San Francisco. Okay? This is just a test run. And they kind of already done it out here in BC on the Strip. Right? They cleared that out real freaking fast. Put a whole bunch of people up into modules. Right? I'm just saying. Okay. So this guy here, he is kind of looking like that potato head dude back in the day when all that shit was going on with the lockdowns, and only he was from Australia or someplace or maybe he was from Britain. I don't know where he came from, but they look kind of the same in some, well, not really, but I mean, he could be human. He could be. But the agenda's all the same. So we're going to pick up where we left off. I don't remember what he was talking about, but I'm sure I will once he starts talking.
Support the police. They work closely with them. The police secure the area. They deal with their end of it. But at that...
Yeah, they deal with their end of it. They go in there and arrest everybody that's breached for something. Missing court. Missing to go meet the probation officer, right? Maybe has a pocket knife on him because, he's living in a dangerous environment and he needs to be able to protect himself, so he's got, a little pocket blade of some kind, like, right? Or whatever, right? First they're going to do that.
At that point, we have a warm bus, right?
And then at that point, we have a warm bus. Yeah. So you have a choice. Get on the bus and go get re-educated and maybe some housing, right? Even though they can't afford it, in terms of the government, because they can't even have housing for the people that need housing, that like are in my situation, right? Right? I'm the next generation of homeless people to get on the fucking bus after they ran my name through the system to see if there's a warrant out for my arrest, right? Don't tell me that's not true, right? As they're telling me, oh, let me help you. You know, you can trust us. Yeah, we're kind. We won't hurt you. Oh, no, no, no. We're a public servant. We get paid to look after you. Yeah, okay. And what did it cost me? It costed me 2 daughters. How much money did you bastards make off my daughters' bodies? With their eggs and their teeth and their organs and their skin and their hair, just whatever. Because you took it all. You took it all. Right? You destroyed my family along the way. You took Uncle John. You stole his money too. You let Eleanor Gilding get away with it. Like as if I'd believe you. Yeah, okay.
They're ready to go.
$1 million per daughter? $2 million? And then whatever Uncle John inherited from Joan, we'll say $500,000. That's $2.2 million. The government is made off of my family already, just with broken body parts? Well, they weren't broken though, you see, that's the thing, right? It was like a gold mine for them people. Yeah.
Everybody is offered an opportunity to be able to go to what we call our navigation center.
Everybody's, okay, first they come with the bus. You can get on the bus, the warm bus, and you're offered to go to that bus is a one-way fucking ticket to the navigation center. Okay? They ain't dropping them off at the bus stop. They're not taking them out of town to go see grandma. No, they're going straight to the navigation center. Once you're on the bus, that's it. You're on the bus. You don't get off until you get to the navigation center.
Okay, that's everybody. So that you offer that to everybody in the camp. And what's the biggest camp that you guys have managed to take on at a time?
Well, I think the biggest camp that I've heard of would be 350 structures since we started this process.
That's structures, but you can get anywhere from 2 to 5 people living in one structure. Okay, that's misleading.
Interestingly enough, though, you would only find probably a few dozen people actually within that tent city when we arrived.
Oh, I see. Okay, so you're looking at numbers under 100 when you're moving in, and you're okay. So that's what, 5 or 6 buses, 4 or 5 buses, something like that.
Yeah, it would depend on the circumstance. Obviously, there'll be police intelligence, and our team would be given a rough idea of what they think is going to be coming. While we're arriving on scene, they're radioing back to that navigation center.
They're radioing. That's what you get on low speed, people. That's the frequency.
They're saying, here's how many people we think we have coming in. One of the big things we have there is we have the ability for them to be able to load and tote their personal belongings.
Load and tote their personal belongings after the city and the cops determined what was garbage. Personal. Your shoes, your pair of pants, if you have it, ID, maybe your glasses, if you can find them in time. Perhaps you have a picture of your mom or your dad or maybe your child or something like that, if you can find it, right? I'm just saying, if you've ever been in these places, I have. It's not that easy to find things. They don't give you a lot of time, right? Okay? So let's be real about it, people. Personal belongings, you get your little backpack of shit. Everything else is considered garbage. That's why he was toting, 1.3 tons of garbage? Yeah, right. I'm sure after you took the garbage to the garbage dump, you had your boys go through it and pick out the treasures. Let's be real about it. One man's junk is another man's treasure, but not everybody goes around robbing people, body snatching their bodies and taking their not personal belongings, just their belongings. Because those belongings at the time of compensation, oh my God, I'm tired. When they were compensated, where it was considered to be garbage until it got to the dump. And before it actually got thrown out, it was picked through. Stop lying.
We don't want.
For crying out loud, they pick through recycling crap. You think they're going to throw out perfectly good shit if they can pick through it, wash? They'll have their disabled workers washing it in some center and then shipping it off to Value Village for a profit.
Want anybody to lose their stuff?
What stuff? You threw it out, 1.3 tons. You let them walk out with a little bag of personal belongings, assuming that they had enough time to find it. I'm telling you, they're only telling you 1/4 of the story.
We even take pets, Jordan. We can load the pets up on that bus. Couples can go together, and we get them from there to the Warm Navigation Center. And they arrive at that navigation center. There's showers available right away. There's food, coffee, things that people may need. Obviously, it's a warm location. We also have shelter beds there for, sometimes people need to dry out or something that may take place, obviously.
What does that mean? Sometimes people need to dry out, take time for what? And he didn't even know what to say. He kind of just moved away from that subject. How many shelter beds? Do you shelter bed each and every one of them? What, you stacking and packing them like New York now? Going 1,000 deep? Pretty soon it will be 10,000 deep? Because, the more people lose their housing, the more homeless you've got. But then that's beneficial for them, though, people, because it brings in more dead bodies. It gives them more opportunity to run their snuff fucking movies through the black web, right? You know what I'm saying? Right? Yeah. You know what I'm saying.
Could be medical circumstances that need to be addressed. Obviously, anybody who would need a hospital, of course, we would use paramedics. We would get them immediately to emergency.
Yeah, well, what's the chances of that? And even if you got them to emergency, what do you do once you're done with them? You throw them right back out in the freaking streets. Let's be real about it. So what? You took them to the emergency. How many times did Sierra go to the emergency and got tossed out like a dirty rag? Too many times to count. Doesn't mean anything.
But beyond that, everything else can be handled in that navigation center. And so when you get there, you interact with our staff, and then there's multiple different stations throughout it, which I'll talk about.
So you get there to the re-education camp, you go from station to station, talking to God knows who or what, considering that we've got coroners on the job that aren't freaking real here, okay?
And the genius, I think, of what we've done here is we brought, instead of trying to take this person from, these 10 cities all over the city to all these different services, we brought all the nonprofits, all the government services together in one spot to come around that individual.
Yeah, but only some nonprofits can be successful, while other nonprofits can't be. I'm the perfect example of that one. Why is that, people? Birds of a feather flock together? Shh. Don't talk about illegal organ harvesting. Shh. Because if you do, you're going to lose your funding. Huh?
Individual. And so they'll arrive and they can get full medicals. There's our medical teams for the street that can deal with that.
Well, they already doing all that. And you listening to this dude, he's just stumbling over his freaking words. Because he's not offering anything new. They can get up in the morning, leave their tent, and go to the doctor if they want to. And for what it's worth, they already go to the hospital. But the hospital does the bare minimum with them if they're not freaking terrorizing them before they throw them out. Like, so stuff it in your ear, right? You're a hypocrite. Seriously.
access to prescriptions. One of the most...
And they can't get that from any other place? So what? You're not providing anything new here, right? And even if they can get their prescriptions, so what? Sierra could get her prescriptions before the social worker came into the house and kicked her ass out in the middle of fucking winter and ruined her life, disconnected her from her methadone so she couldn't get her methadone, because you know how that game works, right? Like, so what? So what? You're just talking hot air. It doesn't mean shit. What? You gonna throw them in jail? Right? They're gonna walk out with their prescription. Cop gonna come and arrest them and say, oh, sorry, we missed you in the scoop. We didn't realize that you had a warrant out for your arrest. The guy will be like, what? I don't got no warrant. Well, you're coming with me. And then what? The prescription means nothing.
Interesting things that you find that a lot of individuals in this circumstance need is ID. They don't have ID no more. So
I wonder why, because the city's always coming in throwing out their fucking shit with the cops. Right? The two main culprits, cops in the city, always throwing out the homeless people's shit. Always. Right? So they throw out their medicines, they throw out their glasses, they throw out their freaking ID, their personal pictures, their keepsakes, everything. Oh, they let them walk away with their personal belongings. You got 5 fucking minutes. Gather it up because everything else is going in the fucking truck. It's going to the trash. No, it's not going to the trash. It's going to the freaking sorting out center so the thieves can pick what they want. That's what's happening, people. That's what's been happening. And then they clean it with their disabled workers with Down syndrome in their fucking, wherever they got them all working for minimum wage, right? To keep them busy. And then they load it up onto some stupid truck and drop it off at Value Village for a fucking profit. Yeah, that's what they do. Don't be fooled.
Our ministerial colleagues over in Service Alberta who handle ID in our province, they're there right on site. They can give temporary ID.
Yeah, temporary. Even if they get new one, you already said many of them make it through whatever it is. Hell, how do you know if they're going to make it? You said this program's only been going on for 3 freaking weeks. So if it's only been going on for 3 freaking weeks, how the hell would you know if it's going to work? Right? You're going to give them new ID for them to be out in the streets in a fucking year from now so that you can repeat the process with your goons coming in, stealing their shit, throwing out their ID, and then calling the homeless persons irresponsible. Yeah. But maybe that person's number will be up and there'll be a profit for your kind. That, I don't know, what you paying for? Fucking hydro to plug in your batteries? Like, seriously, man. The gig is up. The gig is up. I'm going to keep making these videos. I'm going to prove to whoever watches my videos that these things exist and they're dangerous and they're useless and they need to be removed from fucking society. Seriously, man. In terms of whatever that corner was.
Immediately to these individuals, and then we can get their permanent ID ordered, all the pictures. They obviously have access then to income supports.
Oh, but you see, that's nothing new there either, because anyone that's homeless, sure, they don't get the housing part because, you know, it saves the government money, but they do get this. They get the shelters, just the support. They don't get the housing support, financial housing support. But they do get the monthly support. And anyone that doesn't have a monthly support, well, trust me, any homeless person will say, go get it. So you're helping 1 or 2 out of every 500 that might not be on freaking welfare. Okay, so you're not doing nobody no fucking favors because you're not giving them housing support. And what little housing support money that you do give them, your governments and your kind have made it where people can't afford fucking housing because you're too busy reaping the rewards in body parts, in partnership with organized religion, who are criminals. and commit heinous crimes against the people that you so-called say you represent. And that's what makes me think you're not human. Yeah. Being that I've already came into contact with those things.
The register for things that they may be entitled to that they did not know, and then ultimately towards things like temporary housing, emergency.
Temporary housing. Oh, so you can house them in a module for how long? And then what? Where are you going to put them next? You don't have a solution, right? Right? And that's assuming they don't disappear in the interim. And you just hope that nobody asks where they went in terms of, well, maybe mom will just forget that she has a son out there and she won't give a shit if he disappears. Or perhaps dad. But because, if it's a friend out on the streets, it just, who cares? We don't know. He went to Toronto. Must have went to Toronto, so the friend will never know. But if mom comes knocking and say, hey, Mr. Policeman, I'm looking for my son. What happened to my son? You honestly think they're going to tell him? No, they'll be like that dude across the street that got blown out with the fucking federal SWAT team with the RCMP watching, right? And then that white fucking bus van looking hearse thing drove up, and we know what was in there. That man, well, everybody, including the RCMP, are saying that he was hiding out, and that he's hiding out somewhere in the province, but nobody knows where he is. Yeah, okay, you spent $100,000 blowing out Debbie's house to find somebody that you obviously, supposedly couldn't find, even though we know where he is, to put the rumor out that he's hiding out in British Columbia, Canada someplace. And the RCMP and nobody, not even including his wife, can find him. Yeah, right. No, they killed him. And then they drove off with his body, and they do what they do best.
Emergency housing and eventually permanent housing resources.
Eventually, where? What's permanent housing for a homeless person, even if they did get into recovery? Huh? At subpar, right? Subpar what? What? Because you got a whole bunch more coming because you bring in these immigrants, what do you think's going to happen? Huh? Where am I going with my family? Huh? Oh, I know. Amari brings in $3,500 for a foster care parent so that you can get your groove on to say that you saved Amari. Yeah, right. In terms of, right, you won't give me $3,500 a month to look after my grandson, but you'll give a robotoid $3,500 a month to look after my grandson. Or some transgender or something. Been there, done that already with Andre.
You can interact with those individuals, and of course, access to drug recovery programs.
After you destroyed my daughter and turned her into the problem that you're trying to fix now, but you're not fixing it. It's an ambush.
Programs, which we can talk about in a moment. But that is all happening in that one location. And so we've been at this for about 3 weeks.
3 weeks? So how does he know how many people have been successful in this fucking program? He doesn't. Because he specifically said many. Oh, no.
Well over 200 individuals come out of those tent cities and actively participate in this process. We referred to over 500 different services.
Okay, so I'm homeless, all strung out, right? Post-traumatic stress syndrome, right? Blah, 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 blah. And they're going to start, and I don't read very well, and I can't, my cognitive skills aren't that great, and right? And I got no sense of time because of the stress that I've been under and whatever's going on with me, right? And they're going to give me 500 fucking referrals to what? To what? the local food bank, my local hospital. Where else? A rehab center where they have no room. A recovery house where it's full. A detox center where I might go and they'll just kick me out the next day because they can. Where are you going to send me? That's 5. Is there a bread line that I can go? A church. Oh, yeah. You'll send me to a couple of churches, right? For a sandwich or something, maybe, huh? Or some preacher counseling or something like that. What else can you send me to? A referral. It's just a referral. It doesn't mean that they're going to give me the service. It's just a referral. So what? Means nothing.
And we've been pretty impressed with the results of that. Now, that may seem like a small number, but given what we've been working on, this is kind of a real micro area that we're working on. But we think it's been so successful that we're getting ready to bring this right into our actual emergency homeless shelters, which are thousands of individuals, and into other areas where our social services system interacts with the same type of clientele. And again, with the goal of saying, how do we help you stop the circumstances that you're in and move forward. I also want to stress that we talked a lot about drugs today, but there's a lot of mental health issues that are taking place, including schizophrenia and some real challenges, right? These are very serious mental health issues. And by being able to come in, and we have our Alberta Health Services right around us, again, pharmacist support, we can really get some really needed things around those individuals to start to have a good conversation about what a more successful and healthy life might look like.
Okay. So he's setting the stage for a conversation. All right. Oh, lordy. Okay, I think that's basically... I just found it intriguing for a moment until reality kicked in and I got mad. Because I know the real deal. With those layers of an onion. So we're just going to get into an area, well, I didn't hear all that part up to almost that part I heard. I didn't hear any of this. Where are we? We're right here. We still got a long way to go, but I'm not up for it. So I will just leave the link. And you can follow up on it if you'd like. I don't know. It makes me mad, people. I don't even know if I want to finish listening to it because I don't see it as genuine. I really don't. I see it as a smokescreen, forked tongue, double speak, 1/4 true, 3/4 lie, right? I know the bigger picture. I've lost daughters, I've lost Uncle John, my family was very damaged. The government is very corrupt. The courthouses are very corrupt. The police are very corrupt. It's a very lopsided, corrupt society that we live in. So, I don't know. But I think it's important that people come to the acceptance that there are things that walk among us that should not be on this earth, literally. And if they are, they should be in a museum or in a zoo. No other way. Yeah. Because they're detrimental to humanity. They don't bring anything good to the world. They really don't.
To interfere with this process are not people staying inside the tent cities. They're often members of the official opposition in our province, which is the NDP, which is a socialist party within our province, or other activist groups who certainly have never spent one night on the street and are there trying to bang on a drum that has nothing to do with what we're talking about, and they're just trying to use these vulnerable people to be able to, accelerate their agenda, which is very disappointing. I've seen some police body camera footage of these individuals throwing snowballs at the police while they're trying to go and interact and deal with the situation in the encampments. But the vulnerable people, in general, have been pretty excited once they realize what opportunities they have. And I've been there to interact at this navigation center with them, and I've also heard from my staff. And the most common reaction is, I had no idea that these resources were available. And they are quite interested in it. Now, obviously, everybody's at a different stage that may be taking place there. But certainly, I think, you get to a nice warm bed, you can have a warm shower, you probably start to ask questions about whether...
Yeah, how long do you get to have that nice warm bed? Right, and he did say it's only temporary, with the possibility of getting long-term. But there's hoops you have to jump through first, right?
Not you want to continue to sleep inside that tent in minus 50 degrees Celsius, or if this is a better option.
Okay. So now I want to ask you about how you regulate the interactions between people in these centers, because we already discussed the fact that in the tent cities, the fact of the tent cities is an invitation to criminality and gangs. And so the first question I have is, like, how the hell do you ensure that that problem isn't duplicated inside your centers themselves?
So it's a very important question, and I will answer it, but I also want to emphasize that what we see on that, for lack of a better words on that left side of the spectrum when they argue about us taking down these tent cities is they often say, well, your shelters are just as dangerous. Now, again, if you go back through this entire conversation we just had, you realize how ludicrous that is real quick. That said, of course, we start putting thousands of individuals in the same type of demographics, a lot of the same circumstances happening inside our emergency shelter system. You're going to see some of the same elements show up. And we for sure have seen gangs operating within our emergency shelter systems. We are obviously managing overdoses and drug issues and those type of circumstances. But we've invested in security. We are working closely with our local police services who really support us and our often nonprofit emergency shelter providers to be able to navigate through those issues. We've also upped security to be able to make sure that people's stuff is safe. We've had to put a lot of money into dealing with overdoses and other medical issues within.
Yeah, you have to put in a lot of money, but you also make a lot of money with the trafficking of body parts. Let's be real about that one. You see, they're not, they act like they're so godly, where I'm here to remind you they're not.
Our emergency facilities. And while anywhere, as you know, Jordan, in society, where we start to gather that many people together, there's going to be elements of trouble. It is certainly significantly less than what we're seeing inside tent cities, and we're definitely using tools to be able to mitigate those circumstances.
Okay. So now I'm going to ask you some questions more on the psychological and treatment front. As I said, I spent a lot of time looking into the viability of treatment processes that are widely distributable and effective, and on the psychological front, and with regard to addiction counseling and the treatment of various forms of mental.
Do you see how intelligent they sound? How professional and fluent and intriguing to pique your interest in the subject matter at hand? How mature they present themselves with diplomacy, right? It's just a trap, though.
Disorder, and they're few and far between effective treatments. So I want to ask you a couple of questions. The first is...
a trap to fool you. Because it's just a cover-up as to what's really going on.
Have you guys given some consideration to the maximum size of your...
This guy can't say he doesn't know that the cops are handlers with their robotoys. He can't. It's his job to know. He's the one that cuts the check.
your facilities? Because my suspicions are that the smaller you keep those centralized centers, the less trouble you're going to have with their spiraling into criminal activity and gangs, and the more welcoming you'll be able to make them for people who are being taken off the streets. So that's the first question. What have you seen, and are you tracking the data pertaining to the size of the initial treatment facilities?
So we are definitely tracking data, and
Okay, well, first of all, the center that they go to after they get off the bus is not a treatment facility. It's just an intake facility that forwards 500 referrals. Not 500 services, just a whole bunch of pieces of paper with a bunch of fucking things listed down as referrals with a long waiting list per organization when it falls in with that referral, right? Been there, done that with Sierra. Sierra used to come home with those papers all the time, with those quote-unquote referrals. It didn't mean anything. Do you know how many women's shelters and detox centers and all the fucking recovery houses I'd phone to try and get her help, and nobody would take her because they didn't have room? Like, come on, people.
one of the things that we're trying to do on my end of policy and the process that my ministry runs is to try to bring in other types of the ways that we do emergency shelter for the homeless population. So you have your much more traditional shelters that many people would just think about that they'd see on TV, often run by a faith-based organization. I want to say, thank God for our faith-based organizations because they really do good work with us. But we have recognized a need for smaller shelters, shelters that are focused on women only, for example. In our society, in our province, shelters that are Indigenous focused with Indigenous leadership.
I was going to say that.
Right on site to be able to work on that. We've opened up Indigenous-only shelters, women-only shelters inside our province, supported by the government.
I want you
seeing
to see
success by getting that smaller and being able to work with different demographics more
further
focused.
on this.
At the end of the day, what we have in our province and what Premier Smith has done in our province is actually bring in a mental health and addictions cabinet minister, my colleague Dan Williams, who is part of the health system who is fully focused on mental health and addictions. And so he's the best one to talk to about specifically how they handle long-term drug treatment. But what my job now is to rejig the entire social services system in our province to end up connecting to that. And that's where there's a real difference in viewpoints between us and the left, right? I mean, where they want us to build shelter systems where everybody can keep doing drugs and just accept that behavior and ignore the negative consequences of that. We are building shelter systems and processes that connect into the work that Dan Williams and his team are trying to do. And it is a whole different way of thinking. I don't know anywhere else in the province where you've got an entire social services system working on focused on actual recovery care long-term for individuals, right? So we're not in the business of trying to warehouse people. Our job is to find individuals, support them with their immediate medical needs, and then try to connect them to long-term opportunities to get them better.
Okay, so...
But what's the timeline? And how do they plan on doing that when they're just handing out referrals? Right? With no housing available. Because the housing that's being built currently is going in the direction of 3-bedroom and 4-bedroom stack and pack apartments with plastic pipes and metal steel clamps with Presto wood for walls. Right? For the middle class, as the province is supplementing their rent right along with the federal government so that perhaps those people that are living there might at some point as a middle class income household that's being supplemented by both governments can buy that box and take on the responsibility when everything starts falling apart. After the bugs move in, and the mice, and the ants, and the cockroaches, and the bed bugs, and cupboard bugs, and all that shit. Because you know it's going to happen. It's just a matter of time. Right? Like it's stupid. Right? They're too busy just trying to keep the middle class off the streets, people. In Canada. But of course, they will make sure some fall through the cracks. Oh, yeah. Yeah, because they need those bodies. They need those bodies. Yeah. They're using their bodies, people's bodies.
Okay, so that
for
brings me to the
nefarious
second
reasons.
clinical issue I wanted to bring up. So you can treat people.
Remember what I said with Shimei. They had the electrode pads, little square pads, whatever, under the skin that were somehow hooked up to some sort of machine that was pumping a solution through tubes, and then those being spread out in between the pads to give the color to the skin. That was a dead body on a hospital bed. If they could do that on a dead body in a hospital bed, they can do that with a robotoid with a skin suit on. Okay?
People's present distress. But much of people's present distress is rooted in a kind of nihilistic
and because it's being preserved with formaldehyde, you don't get the smell. The reason people embalm bodies is to prevent the smell more than anything else. Okay?
anxiety-ridden hopelessness.
She made it in smell because she was embalmed.
And they say, it's been said forever, that the people perish without a vision. And one of the things you do see with people who adopt a very short-term strategy towards life, which can have a criminal element or an addictive element, is that they don't have anything resembling a vision for their life or a plan. And so we experimented, my colleagues and I
Okay, I'm going to end this video.